everyone, I'm Sweat Niangi, hot and stuffy in this room. Welcome to WrestleTalk News. Here's the top story. Following All Out 2022, with Khan's once prized pony Punk out the picture, Khan turned to MJF as the guy in AEW, where he has reigned as world champion now for almost an entire year and is currently involved in the company's hottest angle in years with Adam Cole. But with success comes leverage, something that Punk himself had a ton of throughout his time in AEW due to his proven statistical draw for TV ratings, viewership, merch, live gates, etc. Writing in this week's Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer discussed how Punk's drawing power led to him gaining more power than others in the locker room, with Meltzer also revealing that AEW World Champion MJF may have been subject to similar resentment from other talents as he was elevated to the top of the roster. Meltzer wrote, but Punk's ability to draw at a level above everyone else on the roster gave him more power than the other wrestlers. And that was also what led to resentment. Some of that was just natural in pro wrestling, as to a degree when MJF became the top guy, there was similar stuff because of the feeling he and Khan were close. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves and call hell and temperature to the scene for a heat report, Meltzer would kind of pour cold water on the situation, as Tempest will say, adding that this kind of thing was pretty normal and not too dissimilar from Vince McMahon and his relationship with most of his top guys. That's not to say there's not talent rather upset with other goings on behind the scene in AEW. Yes, while the firing of Punk was celebrated by many fans, TK's big decision seems to have unsurprisingly split the locker room. According to Meltzer, many within AEW feel that a dark cloud had been lifted over their heads since Punk's departure, expressing how much fun they had at work last weekend. Meltzer then mentioned notable colliders Andrade El Idolo, who publicly posted his support for Punk, as well as Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler of FTR as names who felt quite the opposite. As well as these, 3 others were said to be very upset by Punk's dismissal, painting a picture of a divided roster once again. But maybe things could have been very different if Phil had just kept that nose of his clean, as Meltzer also stated that Matt and Nick Jackson of the Young Bucks would have been willing to work with Punk on one condition: no drama for 6 months. Meltzer revealed one person very close to the situation said that the Bucks had said if 6 months went by without any issue, they would be willing to sit down and work with him. Now, the source of this information will cause debate alone, so who really knows whether this would have actually happened or not. Now, as we all waited with bated breath for Punk's explosive response to his AEW dismissal, his good old pal Ace Steel has beaten him to the punch. Yes, wasting little time to throw some shade at his now former employer, the ex-AEW producer took a page out of Phil's book. He went to his IG story to vent a little, posting a curious reaction to the following quote that most certainly seemed to be directed at AEW president Tony Khan. Mishandling people, then avoiding communication is not protecting your peace, it's avoiding accountability. With Steel adding, ain't that the f***ing truth? LOL. Penny for your thoughts, Mr. Punk. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, next up to do your 1-minute Rampage take. And after that, do a beautiful SmackDown review. Here's the beautiful masked man from Canada. Give it up for the GOAT, the real GOAT, the greatest of all time around here in WrestleTalk. He is Tempest B Canada. B stands for beautiful. Look at this beautiful man who's sweaty and he's hot. You're right, friend.
It's too hot, son.
It's too hot, my friend. Oh my gosh, my head. I'm not taking off this bandana. But you're next. And for all time's sake, hot tag, because it's quite hot around here now. Hot tag, guys. And the screen goes fire, because it's too hot. Just put fire, flames on the screen. It's too hot. Oh gosh.
It is a very hot Rampage One Take set. It's good to have you back, brother.
Good to be back.
Say it home with me. Set. Start the clock. We open our show with Penta beating Jay Lethal in a quarterfinal tournament match, pinning him with the Fear Factor. And no, there was no Joe Rogan to be seen anywhere. Thank God. Then we had Sammy Guevara and Chris Jericho talking about being pissed off with one another and wanting to punch the other in the face, and this segment ended with no one getting punched in the face. Boo. It did end with them setting up a match between them for Grand Slam though, so that's neat and I'm looking forward to it. We then had the Young Bucks beating 2.0 in a pretty quick tag match, but a pretty quick tag match with the Young Bucks is better than almost any other quick tag match. We then had a 6-woman tag match that I would swear we just saw on one of these shows as Sky Blue, Britt Baker, and Hikaru Shida beat the Bunny, Taya Valkyrie, and Anna Jay. Shida and Britt Baker had another miscommunication spot before Baker won with the lockjaw, but why do I care about a miscommunication spot between these two? They're not even a real team. Santana cut a great pre-recorded promo saying his path is one he must walk alone, which means he and Ortiz have not made up and will not be facing the Lucha Brothers. God f***ing damn it. We then had our main event of AEW Impact as Samoa Joe beat Jeff Hardy with the Coquina Clutch. Good main event to a pretty solid Rampage. Time.
Minute and 9 seconds. 9 seconds over. That's beautiful. Still, it's hot and sunny.
It's
hot.
It's the heat.
It's the heat.
It's the heat.
It's the heat. You're still the champion of the world. You're still champion. Still the man.
Maybe some nice blue tones will help us. Some cool blue. Because we have SmackDown, baby, in about 5 minutes. We opened SmackDown with a match as Charlotte Flair and Shotzi beat Io Sky and Bayley, and if you think it's ridiculous for the women's champion to have lost another match, you would be right, but this match set up Io versus Asuka, so perhaps the ends justify the means. This was a pretty basic tag match. Shotzi sold, Charlotte got a hot tag, they cut her off, were distracted by Asuka at ringside, and then Shotzi pinned Bayley with the Fisherwoman's DDT. After the match, Asuka and Io faced off in the ring, and shortly after, Io challenged Asuka to a match backstage. Still not a f***ing match for pay-per-view, we can't have that. This is another match on SmackDown! They're allergic to putting SmackDown matches on pay-per-view, it seems. Also backstage was Jimmy Uso, who tells Paul Heyman that he's still in the Bloodline. And Heyman's iffy on it, but tells him if Jimmy handles AJ Styles tonight, he will handle Jimmy. And then leaves him hanging as he walks off to find AJ, who grabs Heyman and pushes him into a crate, asking who he is, what clout he thinks he has, before Jimmy jumps him and Heyman calls Roman. The most over man in the world has arrived as L.A. Knight. Yeah!
Yeah!
Cut a promo on The Miz. He said Miz's music says I came to play, and if Knight was a moron, he would say look at the adjective, but he'll look at the verb. A shot at Kevin Nash's WCW Big Boys Play promo, Nash, who has also been a critic of Knight in recent months. I popped big for that one. He said he respects John Cena but doesn't need his endorsement, and he said he'd fight Miz again, and then is interrupted by Grayson Waller and Austin Theory. Theory does his usual jibber jabber about beating Cena at Mania, blah blah blah, and then Knight insults them both, and we get our match. Knight beat Theory, thank God, after Waller removed the turnbuckle pad while the ref wasn't looking, and Knight managed to reverse Theory into the buckle and hit the BFT for the win. This was a basic match, but the right man won.
Yeah!
Yeah! Backstage, AJ Styles says Jimmy can attack him from behind all he wants, but that won't stop him from taking care of business tonight. Also backstage, Paul Heyman is talking to Adam Pearce, and L.A. Knight, yeah! Barges in to demand a match with The Miz for next week. Heyman introduces himself and says he's a big fan of L.A. Knight, yeah! But the next time he's conducting business, L.A. Knight, should knock. The Judgment Day come out and gloat about beating Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, and then Dom gets drowned out by nuclear heat. Balor and Priest could talk, but Dom wasn't allowed. The Brawling Brutes interrupt and say Judgment Day couldn't have chosen a worse first challenge. The Judgment Day then beat the Brawling Brutes in pretty decisive fashion in a pretty basic but pretty decent tag match with Pretty Deadly watching on backstage. After the match, Bobby Lashley and the Street Profits came out and said the Bloodline is crumbling, but the Judgment Day isn't the new top faction in WWE. They are. AJ Styles finds the OC backstage laughing at something on Carl Anderson's phone and asks where they were when he got jumped from behind. Carl says they were the ones who said not to get involved in Bloodline business, but AJ says they have always had each other's backs, which, if you remember when AJ Styles got kicked out of the Bullet Club, you'll find that the OC did not in fact have his back. But that's another story. But he says if this is how it is, he doesn't want them anywhere near his match tonight. Asuka says she was the champion. In 2 weeks, Io will learn she isn't ready for Asuka, and she will be champion again. again. Then we had our main event as AJ Styles beat Jimmy Uso. This was another very simple match. Paul Heyman and Solo Sikoa came down to the ring despite saying that Solo Sikoa was not in the building, but they played pretty much no role in the match until afterwards. It was fairly back and forth, and then AJ hit the phenomenal forearm and won before rolling out of the ring and being attacked by the Judgment Day, possibly to get on the good side of the Bloodline, or possibly as a final tribute to Edge, who had his possible retirement match a few weeks ago. Shout out to Judgment Day Edge. And that was SmackDown. There were some fun bits, a line in an LA Knight promo, yeah! The heat on Dominic, but SmackDown is incredibly dull at the moment. It is by far the least interesting of WWE's main shows right now, and this week's show did very little to change that. I'm over here praising NXT, Sat. What? What world are we living in? NXT's good again? Better than SmackDown? What's happened? I don't get and don't particularly care about whatever Jimmy Uso is doing right now, given how little sense it makes, despite what Sat's gonna say on the podcast and tell me otherwise. And it reflects on the whole show for me. This SmackDown gets a 2 out of 5. Yeah! No! And that just about wraps things up for me. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the latest edition of Survival Series over on Parts Unknown, where they try and name every single AEW champion, and I mean every AEW champion. It's a good time. Make sure you check it out. I'll be your friend, and I'll love you forever. Until then, I've been Tempest, that's been Sat. That was LA Knight. Yeah! Yeah! Take care.
I said I didn't want to make silly mistakes. That's a silly mistake.
Let's just sit in silence for a while I think about this.
Hello and welcome back to another exciting edition of Survival Series, the show that teaches me to love wrestling and my friends more than I ever have.